Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach, we begin a new Masechta Sukkah. The first Perek of Masechta Sukkah will discuss the halachas pertaining to the structure of the Sukkah itself. Zok the Mishnah, Sukkah shehi gavoya lamayla mi'esra mama. A Sukkah where the height of the schach of the Sukkah is higher than 20 amas, meaning the inside of the Sukkah, there's a space higher than 20 amas in the height. Psula. So this sukkah is pasul. But Rabbi Yehuda machshe. Rabbi Yehuda says that even this height is kosher as well. V'she'einu gavoya asara tfachim, a sukkah that does not have the height of 10 tfachim. So then there's another case over here, another two cases. V'she'ein lo shalish defanos, a sukkah that does not have 3 walls. V'shechamasa meruba mitzilasa, and a sukkah where the sunlight is more than the shade. In other words, because it has very little schach, so Rashi here explains what happens is the schach, the shade that is batal b'roiv. It's as if there is no shade over here. So then, Mishnah says psula. In all these cases, everybody would agree that it would be pasul. So coming back a second to the case of chamasa meruba mitzilasa, so Rashi here says that it's batal b'roiv. Because it's mostly sunlight and very little shade, so it's batal b'roiv. So first of all, the Rishonim explain what this means is not that the actual schach is batal b'roiv. We're talking about the shade in the sukkah. That shade that you have on the floor of the sukkah, because most of what you have there inside the sukkah is sunlight, the shade is batal b'roiv to the sunlight. And the reason why Rashi says this is because the psul of chamasa meruba mitzilasa is the fact that it's not called a sukkah anymore. As Rashi says, al shem aschach kruya sukkah. The whole name sukkah is because of the schach, not the walls. The main inyan of the sukkah is the schach. So if the schach are not providing more shade than sunlight, so then this area, it does not have the name sukkah. That's the reason for the psul. So the psul of chamasa meruba mitzilasa is not some kind of a shiur, some kind of a minimum amount required to have a schach. But it's because if you have mostly sunlight, it loses its entire name and identity of a sukkah. It's not a sukkah anymore. That's how Rashi learns this inyan. Zok the Gemara Tanan. So we learned in another Mishnah. Hasam. This is the first Mishnah in Masechta Eruvin. Mavoi shehu gavoya mi'esra mama. A mavoi, you have an alleyway. And over there, at the entrance of the alleyway, so as Rashi here brings the halacha by an alleyway, that really minatayra to Rosh Hashanah. It's surrounded from all 3 sides with a wall, so as the halacha of Rosh Hashanah. But because it's open on the 4th side to the Rosh Hashanah, and it's similar, it's karavuli is daimer, Rashi says, it's similar to Rosh Hashanah, so therefore Chachamim required there to be an additional heker, something to make a notice to see that this is separate, and this area is not like the rest of the Rosh Hashanah. So therefore you have to put up a lechi or a kaira at the opening, so you put up a kaira which is a cross beam on top of the opening of this mavi. So over there in the Mishnah it says, if this crossbeam is higher me'esra mama, higher than 20 amas, so it's not good, it's too high, yemayit. So then you have to bring it down. Rabbi Yehuda says, even if it's that high, it's not necessary to bring it down. Now the question is, why here by sukkah, when it's too high, this chacha too high, the Mishnah just says that it's pasul. And why by Mavir, the Mishnah doesn't say pasul, but the Mishnah tells you how to rectify this. Bring it down. Answers the Gemara, there's a difference. Sukkah the Eiraisa, Sukkah, which is a mitzvah min HaTorah, and we'll see soon, the requirement of a being below 20 amas is also learned from Sukkah in the Torah, Tani Psula. So the Tana of the Mishnah tells you the halacha min HaTorah that you learn from Sukkah. This is the halacha. That it said if it has to be below 20 amas, and if not, you didn't make it like the Torah said, so it's pasul. Mavoi, the Rabbanon, but on the other hand, over there where it speaks about a Mavoi, which is midrabbanon, the Rabbanon are the ones that instituted this entire requirement, and they are the ones that gave the details of what this requirement consists of. So Tani Takanta. So there the Mishnah says exactly what the requirement is. There's no point in the Mishnah saying psula. This is the Mishnah that's coming to tell you the details of how the Mavi should be built, how this kaira should be placed. So therefore it comes to tell you, don't place it too high, don't place it too low. there's no reason to say psula. This is the original place where he's telling you how Chachamim instituted it should be done. This is Rashi's pshat in the Gemara. Tosfos learns slightly differently. Tosfos says that really the basis of the Gemara's question that it should say Yemayit, not Psula, is because that's a nicer language. Like we learned in the beginning of Masechta Psachim, that you should use a better language. There's no reason to use a lashon of pasal. So that's why the Gemara asked over here, by Sukkah it should say Yemayit. So the Gemara is answering that by a Sukkah Min HaTorah, we're afraid that someone's going to misinterpret the word Yemayit to mean that only Lechatchila you have to be Memayit. But B'diavad, if you didn't, it's fine. The term Psula makes it clear that it's even B'diavad Pasal. So Min HaTorah, we're concerned of misinterpreting the word Yemayit, so we say Psula. Regarding Midrabanan, by the Mavi, we're not so concerned about that misinterpretation, so we use a cleaner language, a better language of Yemayit. That's Tosfos' pshat. Sagt the Gemara, another teretz, Viba Yisema, or we can say, B'doiraisa nami tani tekante. Really, by a case of Min HaTorah, the Mishnah would have also chosen to say how to rectify it, not to just say that it's possible. Miyu, however, Sukkah the Nefishi Milse, here in this Mishnah regarding Sukkah, where there's a lot of different details, and if you're going to come to say how to rectify each one of these problems, you're going to have to use a different language for each one of them, as Rashi spells it out over here. Regarding each case, you're going to have to use a different language. By if it's too high, you're going to have to say Yemayit. If it's too low, you're going to have to say Yakbiya. If you're missing a wall, you're going to have to say build a wall, and so on. By each one of them, if you're using a language to tell you what you have to do to rectify, you're going to have to use a new word for each one of them. That's an extra arichis. So therefore, the Mishnah says, Pasik Vitani Psula. So the Mishnah says one word Psula, which includes everything. As Rashi says again, this is also based on what we learned in the beginning of Masechta Psachim, that a person should teach b'derech ketzara, use the shortest and most concise language possible. So it uses the term psula, which includes everything. However, by the Mavoi, over there it's not a problem. Mavoi delay nefishim mile. Over there in that Mishnah, it's just talking about this one halacha of the Mavoi that's higher than 20 amas. So there tani tekante. There it uses the word Yemayit to tell you how to rectify it. Now the Gemara comes to the very halach of the Mishnah itself. What's the reason for the Tanakama? Why, if the Sukkah is higher than 20 amas, is it possible? From where do we know this? Omar Rabbe. So Rabbe says, because by a Sukkah the Pasuk says, Laman yedu deresechem ki besukkah seshafte es b'nei Yisrael. That you should know, in all future generations, it should be known that I've placed the Yidden in Sukkahs. So what does this mean? Ad esre mama, up until the height of 20 amas, Adam Yideya Shuhudar B'Sukkah. A person can be aware that he's sitting in the Sukkah. But Lamayla Mesr Mama, if the schach is above 20 amas, Ein Adam Yideya Shadar B'Sukkah. The person won't even be aware that he's sitting in the Sukkah. Why not? Mishum Delay Shalta B'Eina, because a person's eyes don't reach that far. Which doesn't mean that a person can't see to a distance of 20 amas. There's a place in the Ha'ara of a letter from the Rebbe where the Rebbe says the main diak here in the Lashon of the Gemara is Loi Shalta, which means that a person could see if you look in that direction. But a person doesn't lift up his head to see and to look and see what's above him 20 amas. So therefore, you're entering into your sukkah, you're not going to notice. You're not going to realize that you're inside a sukkah. So this is the reason. The Laman Yedu refers to the awareness that there has to be when you enter into the sukkah. Rab Zera says, Mehacha. The source is from this pasuk. Sukkah tia letzeil yoimam. The pasuk describes a sukkah as something that serves as shade. Letzeil yoimam during the day mechayre, from the heat of the sun. So therefore we say as follows: Ad esrei mamo, up until the height of 20 amas. Adam yoshev b'tzeil sukkah. The person sitting in the sukkah is actually receiving the shade that comes from the schach of the sukkah that reaches to the ground. So therefore it's okay. He's getting that shade. L'maylam as from mama. However, if the height of the schach is above 20 amas, ein adam yoshev b'tzeil sukkah. The person does not sit in the shade of the schach of the sukkah, ela b'tzeil tfanos. Then what happens is it's the shade of the walls that brings the shade on the person sitting inside the sukkah. The shade of the schach is way too high. It doesn't reach the person b'chlal. So therefore we see the whole point of the sukkah is the shade. And therefore the shade has to come from the schach on the person inside the sukkah. Amalei Abaye asks on this pshat of Rab Zera, Elamayata, if so, a person that builds a sukkah in a place like Ashtaris Karnayim, which is a place in a valley between two tall mountains. So here, what's happening? You're not getting the shade from the schach of your sukkah, because you have the shade from the two mountains that are providing you shade, and not from the schach of the sukkah. So sukkah. So here as well, this would not be considered a kosher sukkah. That can't be. What's just because it's between mountains, you can't build a sukkah there. Amalei, so Abzeda answered and explained, no, you misunderstood what I said. The issue is not the fact that he's actually getting shade from the walls. Okay, if he's actually getting shade from the walls, that's fine. Just like in this case, if you're actually getting shade from the mountains, it's also okay. But the point is as follows. Hasam, in that case of the mountains, Dal Ashtaris Karnayim, remove the Ashtaris Karnayim, remove those mountains, Iketzel Sukkah. You will have the shade of the Sukkah, because the schach is low enough that the shade, the sukkah will provide for you shade. Right now, you don't need it because you have the mountains that are there that are giving you the shade. But the position of the schach is in a place where if you would take away those ashtaris, if you take away the mountains, you would have the shade of the sukkah. However, here, dal defanais, if you remove the walls, leketzel sukkah, you don't have the shade of the sukkah. The shade of the schach of the sukkah is way too high, and therefore it's not even in a position that it could provide for you shade. So therefore this is not called a sukkah b'chlal. As Rashi said in the beginning, a sukkah is because of the schach. And if it doesn't provide shade for the person inside the sukkah, it's not called a sukkah. That's the issue. Rava Amar, a third pshat, Rava says, mehocha. We learn it out from this pasuk. The sukkah is teishvu shivas yamim. You should sit in the sukkah for 7 days. Amra Teira. So what the Teira here is saying is, Kol shivas hayamim, 7 days of sukkah, tzei mediras kva. You should leave your permanent dwelling, v'shev b'diras arai, and live in a temporary dwelling. In other words, as some of Farshim say, the diak is from the word teishvu. Teishvu means you're sitting there, but it's not permanent. So therefore, what does that mean? It means that the actual structure of the sukkah has to be a temporary structure. And therefore we say, Ades Ramamo, if you're building a sukkah that's the height of 20 ames, up until 20 ames, you're building a temporary structure. You don't have to build a very strong, firm structure in order for it to stand. But if you're building a structure of a sukkah higher than 20 ames, so then you're not going to make it a temporary dwelling. It's going to collapse on you. You have to build a proper foundation. You have to build the proper walls that it should stand. It's very tall. So therefore it's not anymore diras ara. It's a diras kva. So this is the source, the actual structure of the sukkah. So this is not a psul related to the schach. According to the other two opinions, the point was that either you have to be aware of the schach or you have to get the shade of the schach. Here the issue is the structure of the sukkah itself, the walls of the sukkah, that it has to be a diras ara, not a diras kva. The Rebbe points out an interesting thing, that it comes out that the actual structure of the sukkah has to be a diras ara. But the way a person lives in the sukkah, the Gemara says that the 7 days of sukkahs, you should leave your house and you should take everything and make the sukkah your diras kva, and fully live in the sukkah, eat and drink and be metayel and do everything in the sukkah. So the way you live there has to actually be b'kvias. So what this represents is that in the days of sukkahs, a person goes out of his diras kva, the gashmis that was kva, he goes into the sukkah, and the actual structure of the sukkah is arai, representing the fact that the gashmis of the world becomes arai to him, but yet over there, the actual mitzvah that he fulfills is sitting there fully entering to the sukkah, as it's the famous vart that it says that regarding the sukkah, that it's the only mitzvah that a person enters fully his entire body, together with his boots and everything else, all of his belongings inside the sukkah. Amalei Abaye asks on this pshat of Rava. So Ela Meyata, if that's the issue here, that a sukkah cannot be a permanent structure, so then the issue is not necessarily the height. Also mechitzes shel barzel. If you make partitions that are made from steel, v'sichach al gaban, and you place chach on them, so it's a permanent structure. Ochanamid le'av sukkah, is that also an issue? It's not going to be a sukkah. We never find any difference what kind of quality the walls are, steel, or if it's just flimsy walls. Amalei. So Rava answers and explains, Hachi kaminalach. This is what I meant to say to you. Ad chofama. When you have a height of a sukkah up until 20 ames, the adam oise dirasai diris arai. That typically this is a height of a structure that a person could make it to stand even if it's temporary. So therefore, ki avid leidiras kva nami nafik. Even if you're going to make it in a way that it's permanent, like you said, with steel walls, you're also going to be yaitze. But l'mayla mechafama, if it's higher than 20 amas, the other maisa dirase diras kva. Typically, this is made as a permanent structure because otherwise it's going to fall. So even ki avid leidiras ara, even if you did make it as a temporary structure, nami leinafik, you're also not going to be yaitze. So as Rashi explains, the point that Rav is saying over here is that what the Torah is particular about is not whether it's actually a permanent structure or actually a temporary structure. Rather, the Torah is giving you a certain shiur here. By writing this word teishvu and telling you that there has to be a temporary structure, what it's saying is that use that shiur, which is typically a temporary structure, and not the shiur of a height that's typically a permanent structure. That's the source. So we have three different pshatim here. And now the Gemara will explain that there are nafkaminis between them, as we'll see. Zok the Gemara. So kulu karabi. So first the Gemara explains why they don't agree with each other, why one said his opinion and not the other. Zok the Gemara, kulu karaba lo yamri. So we understand why all the other Amiraim refused to say Rabba's opinion, which was from Laman Yedu, that you have to be aware that you're sitting in a sukkah. Because that pasuk is not coming to say regarding how you fulfill the mitzvah, that you have to be aware when you walk into the sukkah that you're sitting in a sukkah. That pasuk is just saying the point of mitzvah sukkah, that the Eibusha gave us the mitzvahs for future generations, that the future generations should remember and know that the Eibusha took us out of Mitzrayim. It's not regarding how you fulfill the mitzvah. So there's no raya from that pasuk at all. We understand also why the Adam Eiraim did not want to use the pasuk of Rab Zeira, Sukkah Til Etzel Yoimam. That's not a pasuk in Chumash, that's a pasuk in Yeshaya. And therefore what they say is, Hahu Liyamaisa Mashiach. There it's describing the sukkah that Eibush is going to build for the Yidden Lasa Lave Yamaisa Mashiach. So it's a different thing. And Rab Zeira says, no, you're true, it refers to Yemaisa Mashiach, but there's still a raya that we can bring for the mitzvah of Sukkah. Because in Cain, if it's only referring to Yemaisa Mashiach, Le'mekra v'chuppah til etzel yemam. The pasuk should say the term chuppah. The Eibush is going to build a canopy, a chuppah for the Yidden to be under then, not the mitzvah of Sukkah. My Sukkah til etzel yemam. Why did the pasuk change the language and use the term Sukkah? Shamet minotarti. So you could learn from this pasuk two things. It's speaking about the future, but it's also writing the word sukkah to tell you the halacha by a sukkah that you have to have, the schach has to be in a position where you get the shade of the schach. Kerav and Amila Yamri, and we also understand why the other Amiram did not agree to Rav's pshat, that the actual structure of the sukkah has to be temporary, mishum kushi da Abaya, because of the question of the Abaya, of Abaya, that if the point is that it should be a temporary structure, then the issue should not be with the height. The issue should be with the actual materials that you use for the partitions of the walls of the sukkah. And as Rashi says, the other Mayroim did not agree to the answer of Rava, that the Torah is telling you a shiur of what's typically used. If you have a diak in the pasuk and it says teishvu, and it has to be a temporary, so then it should be a temporary structure regardless of the height. So therefore they didn't agree to the answer of Rava. Now the Gemara brings other Amiroim that spoke about this machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan, whether it's kosher if it's higher than 20 amas, and how what they said is relevant to the different reasons that we have for the machlokes. Kaman Ozla, according to which one of these reasons that we gave goes ha the Omar Rabbi Yeshia, that follows this that Rabbi Yeshia said. Omar Rav, in the name of Rav. Machlokes, the whole machlokes regarding a sukkah that's too high, b'she'ein defanois magias l'schach. If the walls don't extend all the way up to the schach. Avol defanois magias l'schach. If the walls extend all the way to the schach, so then afilu l'mayla mesrim amok sheira. Even a sukkah that's taller than 20 amas, it's fine, it's going to be kosher. The issue is if the height of the walls don't reach the schach. Come on, according to which reasons does this distinction matter? So the Gemara answers, Kerabba. It makes sense according to Rabba's reason. The Omar, Rabba said, Mishum delay shalta ba'ena, that the issue of a schach, of a sukkah that's too high, is that a person's eyes don't reach there, a person doesn't look up that far. So therefore, over here we can understand the difference. The kivin, the defanis magias l'schach, if the walls actually reach all the way up to the schach, so then there's no issue. Mishlet shalta ba'ena. A person's eyes will follow along the walls, and he'll look up and he'll see the schach that's there. So the whole machlokes is if the walls don't reach to the schach, so your eyes are not going to get there. But according to the other opinions, makes no difference. Kaman Ozla, now there's another opinion that puts a limitation to the machlokes. So according to who does that opinion go? Rav Huna said in the name of Rav a different limitation. Machlokes, the whole argument between the Tanakama and Rav Yehuda is b'she'ein ba ela arba amas al arba amas. When you have a very small sukkah, it's 4 amas by 4 amas. Avol yesh ba yosim arba amas al arba amas, a sukkah that's larger than 4 by 4 amas, then afilu l'mayla mesra mama, even if it's higher than 20 amas, ksheira, it'll be kosher. Kaman, according to who does the size of the sukkah itself matter? Rab Zayda. That's according to Rab Zayda. The Omar Mishum Tseil. What did Rab Zayda say? The issue is when the schach of the sukkah is too high, the shade of the sukkah doesn't reach the person sitting inside the sukkah. But the kivin de reviche. So therefore, according to him, we understand that if it would be a bigger sukkah, so then iketzel sukkah. So then even if the schach of the sukkah is very high, but if you have a larger sukkah, so then the schach of the sukkah at that height will reach the bottom. It's only if it's a very small, narrow space in the sukkah, so then the schach all the way up there does not reach at the bottom. So therefore this is according to Rab Zayda's opinion. Taisus points out that it's still difficult to understand. Does this mean that according to Rab Zayda, if it's just a drop larger than 4 by 4 amas, we're going to say that the schach of the sukkah reaches there? I mean, just a drop more doesn't make that much of a difference. So Taisus has 2 pshatim. One pshat Taisus says, well, what it really means is, according to Rav Huna Marav is saying that you have to measure it accordingly. You have to see. It depends how high it is and depends how wide it is. The wider it gets, so then the higher up it could be. So you have to measure it accordingly to see that the shade of the schach that's up there should reach at the bottom. But it doesn't mean literally that 4 amas by 4 amas it's puzzle and a drop more, it's always going to be kosher. But then there is a second shot in Taisus, where Taisus says, Kimlu de Rabbanan. This is a shiur that the Rabbanan know and established that 4 by 4 amas, the schach, the shade of the schach does not reach. Even a drop more than 4 by 4 amas, the shade of the schach will to some extent reach to the bottom of the sukkah. Kimlu Rabbanan. Very interesting. So Taisus brings an example for this. Where do we find this Kimlu Rabbanan? We just learned this in the Gemara and Yuma, where there it says regarding the shiur of a kakaisvis, for a person that he eats on Yom Kippur and he breaks his fast, that it calms him down. The Gemara asked, isn't there a difference if you're a body like Oig Melech HaBashan, if you're a body of a small person? So the Gemara says, no, Kimlu Rabbanan, that's the shiur that will calm a person down regardless of how large your body is. Similar here, Taisa says, Kimlu Rabbanan. But I'm not sure how to explain this, because if over there, regarding the kakaisvis, the pshat over there is that there's this nekudas hachayis, there's the point of life that is the same by every person. The largest body and the smallest body. Explained that there. That's how the Rebbe explains that Gemara. Here though, can't apply that point. Over here regarding the shade of the sukkah that's that high, Kimlu Rabbanan, that if it's a drop larger than 4 by 4 amas, somehow the shade to some extent somewhere is going to reach to the bottom of the sukkah. That's what Taisa says. Okay, the Gemara now brings a third opinion that put a limitation exactly when this machlokes is. Kaman Ozla, according to which one of the reasons does it go? Hada Amar Rav Chanan bar Rab Amar Rav. So he said in the name of Rav that machlokes, whole argument here, if it's higher than 20 ames, is b'she'ena machzekes el kedei roishe v'rubay v'shulchanai. When the sukkah is so small that it's actually less than 4 by 4 ames, very small sukkah, and it only holds in it, this is the smallest size of a sukkah, the person's head, most of his body, and the table. But if the sukkah is larger than the minimum size of his head, and most of his body, and the table, then and even higher than 20 amas, the sukkah would be kosher. Kaman, according to whose opinion does it make sense to say that the argument is only in such a tiny sukkah? So the Gemara says, the loy kechat, it doesn't follow any of the reasons that we gave before. As Rashi says, if the reason is that the person's eyes don't reach up, so even if it's a larger size, a person's eyes won't reach there. Even the reason that you have to have the shade reaching the person below, even if it's larger than this, the shade still won't reach. The shade won't reach even if it's 4 by 4 amas, which is larger than this size. And the point of mechitzas kva, that if you're building such a high structure, you have to build permanent walls, that would be even in such a small sukkah, it makes no difference. So this reason here, or this limitation that the machlokes is only in this tiny sukkah of roishe v'rubei v'shulchanai, doesn't fit with any of the reasons that it says before. Taisus over here, so Rashi says, so we don't know what the reason is. But Taisva says that maybe the reason is because such a tiny sukkah with such a height, then it becomes like a lul shaltarna goylin. It looks like a chicken coop. So it doesn't have the structure and the shape of a sukkah. That's why it's puzzle. But if it's a little bit broader, so then even if it's high, it doesn't look like a lul shaltarna goylin. That's Taisva's pshat. Okay, so we have three different limitations of exactly in what case the machlokes were applied, and without, if not in that shape and that size, the machlokes does not apply. So now the Gemara says, "Bish loyme de Rabbi Yeshia, pliga de Rav Huna v'Rav Chanan bar Abba." We understand Rav Yeshia, why he argued on what Rav Huna and Rav Chanan bar Abba said. So the reason is the inu kayavi shiur b'meshcha, because they created the limitation of this machlokes in the size and the extent of the space of how large the sukkah is. V'iyu loikayav shiur b'meshcha, and he does not give any shiur in the size of the sukkah itself. So that's a much better pshat, because you saw the Mishnah. The Mishnah doesn't give any such kind of limitation in the size of the sukkah itself. It only talks about the height of the sukkah. So therefore, he would rather say that if there's any limitation in the machlokes, it's regarding the walls, if it extends all the way up to the schach, but not a limitation in the actual space and the size of the sukkah itself. Elo Rav Huna v'Rav Chanan bar Abba, but Rav Huna and Rav Chanan bar Abba, so they were arguing about the actual size of the sukkah itself. Are they arguing about a size of a sukkah that's 4 by 4 amas, or a size of a sukkah which Roishei, Rubei, v'Shulchanai could enter into the sukkah, which is even smaller than that? So maybe the Gemara says, Neime, should we say, Behechsher sukkah kamiflagi, that the basis of their machlokes is actually what is the smallest size and the space and the width of a sukkah that it would be kosher. The Marasavar Hechsher sukkah bar ba'amis. So the first opinion of here is, which was Rav Huna, he says that the smallest size of a sukkah is 4 amas, and therefore that's that size of the sukkah that they argued about. Omar Savar and Rav Chanan bar Abba holds Hechsher sukkah b'machzekas reishi v'rubi v'shulchanai, that the smallest sukkah is smaller. As long as your head, most of your body, and your table could enter, that's the size of a sukkah, and therefore that's when the machlokes is. So as Rashi explains, what the Gemara is actually now suggesting is, maybe we should go back and say, like we said before, that the issue of the shade not reaching the ground of the sukkah is only by the smallest size of the sukkah. If it's large, any larger than the smallest size of the sukkah, then we could rely on the fact that the shade will reach to the bottom. So therefore, each one of them is saying that the machlokes is only by the smallest size of a kosher sukkah. So the basis of their argument really is, what is the smallest size of a kosher sukkah? And that's, in other words, not like the Gemara said before, that Rav Chanan bar Abba's opinion is deloy kechad. No, maybe we could say that they are arguing about what is the smallest size of a sukkah. So the Gemara says, no, that's not what this machlokes is about. Loi, the kula alma, everybody would agree, Hechsher sukkah, Roishei, v'Rubei, v'Shulchanai. The actual size, the smallest size of a kosher sukkah is to have a space that your head, most of your body, and your table enter. But v'hacha b'haka miflagi, over here the argument is different, as we've explained before. The Mar Savar, one opinion is v'machzekas Roishei, v'Rubei, v'Shulchanai pligi, that they're arguing in this size, in this smallest size of a sukkah. Aval yaisem Roishei, v'Rubei, v'Shulchanai divrei hakol ksheira. Larger than that, everybody holds it's kosher. And as we said before, according to Rashi, we don't know what the reason is. Why is larger than that it would be kosher? Taisa says because it would look like a lul shaltarna goylin. Omar Savar, but then the other opinion is Meiroishe v'Rubi v'Shulchanai ad dal dames pligi. The argument regarding the height of the sukkah is up until 4 amas. Avo yosim dal dames divrei hakol ksheira. More than dal dames, everybody would agree that even such a tall sukkah is kosher. And as we already explained before, because the issue is about the shade reaching the ground. And if it's 4 amas or less than 4 amas, the shade does not reach the ground. But as if it's more than 4 amas, the shade does reach the ground. So the requirement of the minimum size of a hechsher of a sukkah is one point. That's one argument. And over there, actually, everybody agrees that this minimum size is Roishei, v'Rubei, v'Shulchanai. And the issue of the height of the schach of the sukkah, whether it reaches the ground or not, that's a different issue. These two things are not connected to each other. The Gemara now asks a question on these opinions that said that the argument was only regarding a very small sukkah. Sukkah, so it says in the Braisa as follows: Sukkah shigavay l'mayla mesr mam, sukkah that's higher than 20 amas psula is possible. V'Rab Yehuda machshe, and Rab Yehuda says that it's kosher. Adar boim v'chamishim, even if it's 40, 50 amas, which is not lav dafke, but it means any as high as it is, it doesn't matter. Amar Rab Yehuda, so Rab Yehuda brought a raya to his opinion. Ma'isa b'Hilni Amalka b'Lod. There was an incident with Hilni Amalka in the city of Lod. Shaisa sukasa gavaya mesr mama. She built a sukkah and it was taller than 20 amas. Va'yizekeinim nechnasim v'yaitzim l'sham. The elders of Talmidei Chachamim, they came in and out from her sukkah. V'lo yamru l'dava. They didn't comment anything to her about the fact that the schach of her sukkah is so high. Amrullah, the Chachamim responded to Rab Yehuda's raya. Misham raya? You're bringing a raya from a sukkah from a woman from Hilni Amalka? Isha isa, she's a woman, uptura min a sukkah, and therefore she's pater from a sukkah. Amalahem, but Rabbi Yehuda said, but v'haloi shiva banim hayula, she had 7 sons that were with her. It's not just her sitting in the sukkah, her children are with her. And v'yoid, another thing, kol masel le'asasa el al pi chachamim. Everything she did was only according to what the chachamim told her. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda says there is a raya from there that this height of a sukkah is still kosher. This is the Braisa. So first the Gemara clarifies Pshat in the Braisa, and then it'll come to the question that it wants to ask. So Lama li lemisni, why does the Braisa add V'oid kol masel le'asa el al pi chachamim? That everything she did was according to what the chachamim said. What is that out of it? We're talking about a mitzvah of Sukkah and Atayra. So what is it saying? Hachi ka'amar. This is what the Braisa is saying. Hachi ka'amar luhu. This is what Rabbi Yehuda was saying to the chachamim. Ki taimro, if you're going to say, banim ketanim hayu, that I'm arguing to you that it wasn't only a woman, wasn't only her, she had her children with her. So you're going to answer me, the children she had with her, they were ketanim, they were not bar mitzvah, so they're not obligated in the mitzvah of sukkah either. Or ketanim betunim in a sukkah. But my answer to that is, kiv in the shiva havu. So specifically he mentioned that she had 7 children. It's impossible that there shouldn't be one child that's old enough that does not rely on his mother, and therefore, in other words, the Gemara says this later in the Masechta, a child that wakes up at night and then doesn't call his mother, so he is already obligated to be mechanachim midrabanan in the mitzvah of sukkah. So therefore, there's someone here, even if she's pater from the sukkah, and some of the children are pater from the sukkah, but if there are 7 children, there's definitely one of them that's old enough that would be chayiv in the mitzvah of sukkah midrabanan. Now, v'chi teimru. So if you're going to answer back and argue, cotton she'ein etzarech li'imai midrabanan u'demechayiv. If we're only talking about a cotton that does not rely on his mother, and therefore we have to be mechanachim in the mitzvah of sukkah, but he's only chayiv midrabanan. And v'i b'derabanan le'mashkecha, and she wasn't particular about fulfilling the mitzvahs midrabanan. So therefore, there's no raya from the fact that she built a sukkah that was possible. But Toshema, that's where the Braisa comes and adds and says that Rabbi Yehuda said to the Chachamim, V'oid kol masel yasel al pi Chachamim, that everything she did was always according to what the Chachamim required. So therefore, if she had her children with her in the sukkah, and the Chachamim were walking in and out and they said nothing to her, it must be that this is a kosher sukkah. Until here is the Braisa and the Pshat in the Braisa. Incidentally, there's an interesting thing that you learn from here, because we're talking about a mother and her children. And Rashi says that over here, midrabanan, she has to be mechanach her children to the mitzvah of sukkah. So the Mefarshim point out that from this Rashi, it seems that the mitzvah of chinuch is not only on the father, but even on the mother. That's what it comes out according to Rashi. Other Rishonim, though, disagree and say that really the mitzvah of chinuch is on the father, and the Braisa doesn't mention it, but the father must have been there as well. There's a few pshatim about this, but this is a very interesting source, incidentally, regarding the whole union of chinuch, if it lies in the mother or not. So now the Gemara says what its question is on the various different interpretations of this machlokes between Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama is. So now, according to the opinion, the first opinion of Yeshia that said, that the machlokes of the Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda is in a sukkah where the schach is so high and the schach does not extend all the way to the schach. So then a person's eyes won't go up, won't see the schach. So then we could say that that's exactly what this case in this Braisa was. Because Darka Shal Malka Leishiv Besukkah, it's customary for a queen that to sit in such a kind of a sukkah, she'ein defanais magiyais l'schach, where the walls do not reach the schach. Why? Mishum avira, to have the circulation of the air. In other words, you're building a sukkah for a queen, you're building the best and nicest sukkah. So they built a beautiful sukkah with a very tall roof, and also with space for circulation, and therefore the walls didn't reach to the schach. And this is the case that Rabbi Yehuda was bringing a raya to his opinion. This is the case that they argue about, and he had a raya. But according to both opinions that we said before, that Besukkah Ketana Machlokes, that the whole Machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Tanakama was only regarding a very small sukkah, whether a sukkah of 4 amas or a sukkah of Roishe Virubai, the tiny sukkah. V'chidarka Shamal Kalesha Besukkah Ketana. Is it customary for a queen to sit in such a tiny sukkah? It was probably a much larger sukkah. She has her servants with her and so on. So in such a case, even the Rabbanim would agree that higher than 20 amas is kosher. So why are they even discussing this? So the Gemara answers, let's finish this Inyan over here. We're going to finish a little further down to finish the subject. So the answer is, the sukkah was not just one little tiny sukkah, but it was a sukkah that was made with small rooms in it. And she was sitting in one of these small rooms, whether 4 amas or a sukkah that's Roishe Virubai and Shulchanai. So that's the kind of sukkah she was sitting in. So it is relevant to the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan. But the Gemara doesn't accept this either. There's a queen sit in such a sukkah that only has these little rooms in it. She has to have a large room in it to have all her servants come and help her. So the Gemara says, that really, yes, you're right. Of course there was a large sukkah here. But she was sitting in one of those small rooms that was made in this large sukkah. So she has a large sukkah for all the servants, but then for more modesty, she would sit inside this small room in this sukkah. And that's where the discussion between Rabbi Yehuda and the Rabbanan was whether it was a kosher sukkah or not when it's higher than 20 amas. And now the Gemara explains exactly what their machlokes about this incident was. So Rabbanan Savri, what Rabbanan held was, Banea b'sukkah ma'al yasvi. Her children were with her, but they were sitting in a good sukkah because they were in the larger sukkah. And in the larger sukkah, Rabbanan are maida that even so high, the sukkah is kosher. And she was sitting in the smaller room in the sukkah, mishum tznius, for modesty. So therefore the Chachamim didn't say anything to her. She's pater from the sukkah. Her children that are obligated in the sukkah because the chinuch are sitting in the large sukkah. Rabbi Yehuda Savar, however, Rabbi Yehuda held, no, her children were sitting together with her. And nevertheless, the Chachamim didn't say anything to her. So we see that even that small space is still a kosher sukkah, even though the wall, the schach is so high. That's the raya. So Rashi here has 2 pshatim, whether this answer of the Gemara could fit even according to the opinion that we're talking about such a tiny sukkah, which is only Roishe V'Ruvei V'Shulchanei. Because if that's how small this little space is, how are 7 children entering into such a tiny space? That he says, Rabbi Yehuda says that her 7 children were there as well. So in the first pshat, Rashi says that usually Roishe V'Ruvei V'Shulchanei, a person in those times, they would spread out their feet, they would sit by a seva. So to have most of your body enter into the sukkah, you have to have a larger space. So here, her children were sitting sort of squeezed together, not spread out in such a way, so maybe there's some way how to fit them in. But the second shot, Rashi says, and Rashi accepts that second shot, that this answer of the Gemara does not fit with that opinion that the sukkah is so tiny that it's only Roishe V'Ruvei V'Shulchanei. There's no way to get the children into there. So this is only an answer for the opinion that the sukkah is 4 by 4 amas.